Hello and welcome to yet another episode of PhD the Philosophical Drama Season 3. I'm Amogh and I'm glad to be back hosting the show after a bit of a break and bring you a very brand new theme that is not just an integral part of a PhD story, but it indeed is a part of life, and that is tackling failures. Now, nobody chooses failures, but failures are an integral part of every journey that one takes. So it becomes very important to have the right attitude in tackling these failures. And as one wise person very wonderfully said, that failure is the most underrated teacher in any journey. So today, to discuss this particular aspect of PhD, we have a grad student from the University of Geneva in Switzerland. His name is Neel Deorukhkar, and he's originally from Mumbai, India. Neel is in the fourth year of his PhD, and let's see what he has in store for us with his PhD story and his mantra for tackling failures. So let's just try and add Neel to the live talk.
Hello, Amogh. Hello,
Hello, that
everyone.
welcome. First of all,
Yeah.
welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for the great introduction. Failure is definitely something that we come across so often. And when you suggested the topic to me, I was very excited. Well, it's not a bastion of PhD students per se, but it's something that everyone goes through, and more so PhD students in their day-to-day lives. So I think it's very relevant to me being in the fourth or
Yes,
rather the fifth year of my PhD now.
yes, and we'll not just talk about tackling failures, but we'll also talk about your PhD story, which I'm sure you're excited to share with all of us.
Yeah.
So to begin with, I will take you back a few years and ask you that phase of your life when you had this idea of there's something called PhD, and should I do it, should I not do it, that kind of a dilemma, or you didn't have that dilemma. But take us back there when you were thinking about there's something after masters that you have a PhD.
Yeah, so the journey actually goes back uh, a really long way. When I was in school, I actually wanted to become a doctor, but that in a normal sense, in a medical
In the
doctor.
medical sense, yeah.
Yeah. My parents were not so confident about me being able to study because somehow what they tell me now is that I have a very short attention span, and so I would not sit at one place. And probably a medical doctor. Uh, Being a medical doctor takes a lot of patience and being able to be in stressful situations for longer time. And so they were not really confident about whether I
Mhm.
could do it or not. And somehow they tried to turn me towards engineering that would probably be a bit less stressful now that I see my friends doing it. I'm not sure that's the case either.
Mhm.
But yeah, probably that was a bit more accessible career for me. And I went that way, but eventually I learned uh, very quickly that I was not made for it. So eventually,
Mhm.
I mean, this was probably the course of action. I still wanted to be a doctor, but maybe not a medical doctor. So I turned my attention towards something that I actually
Right.
discovered when I was studying for engineering exams. I love chemistry a lot, and so that became something that I concentrated a lot on
Mhm.
in the first 2 years of my, let's say, we call it junior college in Bombay, but everywhere else is still school. So grade
Right.
11 and grade 12, I loved chemistry so much that I thought maybe, yeah, this is something that we can do forever. And obviously, when you have to do something in natural sciences, you go get a bachelor, get a master, and then get a PhD. The thing is, I wasn't really sure I would end up doing a PhD either at the end. So it
Right.
was more of a journey where I was discovering new things for myself. But yeah,
But when was this idea of PhD? When were you introduced to this idea of doing a PhD?
I think
I'm
it
sure
was
it's not introduced in the 11th and 12th grade
no,
in
absolutely
our
not.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I was doing a proto research project when I was doing my bachelor as well. This is
Mhm.
something that is not included in your curriculum, and I like the research part so much, and I finally decided maybe this is the career for me. And that's
Wow,
when
wow,
I thought, for the
interesting.
first time, I guess.
Yeah, and then how did you land up in Geneva? Like, what was that journey? When you decided finally that you want to do a PhD, how
Yeah.
did you come here?
I was looking at a lot of places. I think the things that I'm doing, well, my field is in organic chemistry, but coordination chemistry to narrow it down a bit further. Coordination chemistry is quite old, uh, to be very frank, and there are a lot of different streams of research within coordination chemistry. But coordination chemistry is something that Alfred Werner gave birth to, and Alfred Werner is Swiss, so it would make absolute sense to come to Switzerland and study coordination chemistry. But that was 100
Okay.
years ago that Alfred Werner was alive. The person that I'm working with, Claude Piguet, is someone who is well known in this field as well for lanthanide
Mhm.
chemistry, and this is something that influenced my decision a lot.
Right, right. That's wonderful. But I'm going to ask you that, like, when you start applying, you are sure to have some rejections or some level of, people just don't reply. And that is, I think, the first kind of a feeling of failure right at the beginning of your journey. Was this the case with you, or how was it about
Oh,
applying
absolutely
for,
was
for
the
the
case with me. I applied to a lot of places. I got rejected by a lot of people for not having the kind of experience that they needed in a PhD student that they would take in. Sometimes
right,
they rejected me because they would not have funding for a PhD student. So these are the two reasons out of so many that they would
right,
quote a lot of times. Some of them, as you said, would not reply at all, even after sending
right, right.
4 or 5 emails, I would say, 4 or 5 being generous.
Right, right. But then how was that phase for you? I mean, what would you tell yourself to, go ahead and make another application after you have either a rejection or someone you just didn't reply?
Yeah, it's difficult to take as it is with any kind of rejection. So I think we tend to take it personally, especially when
Right,
you are 23, 24, 22, which is typically the
right,
age that people finish their masters and start applying for a PhD. It's a bit difficult to take, but it happens. I think it hurts a little bit for the first 10, 15 times, and then you kind of get used to it. So I think it's a bit better after.
mhm.
But still, I mean, that's on the funny part. On the more serious stuff, it still hurts a lot when someone
Yeah,
rejects you for a PhD position for whatever reason it is.
right, right.
But to deal with that, I would just, the thing is, rejection is bad probably, but when you're doing something that you love, rejection is just a minor part of it. If it's
Hmm.
something that you really are passionate about, I think you can just sideline rejection for a while, or maybe just numb the effects of it a little bit and keep motoring through.
Right, right. You still keep the main goal in focus and you still, try and fudge up forward to just achieve it in a way,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and then you were selected in University of Geneva, and then you came here. Uh, in the initial phase, now you're really an experienced PhD student, so you can really go back and really think about it in hindsight. But in the initial phase, you are having this day-to-day struggles. You are having struggles with setting up new experiments, trying to acclimatize to the new working conditions, to new people, to the new culture. How was your initial phase in doing a PhD?
I think I can break it down into multiple years. That would be 4 years, but then I can break it down into patches of 6 months as well. The first 6 months are
Okay.
probably the toughest because you're trying to learn a lot of new things. The first 6 months, especially because you're coming from a different country, so you have
Mhm.
a work ethic or things. Basically, the way you work in science or in general interactions with your coworkers, colleagues, whatever it is, are
Right,
very different from what we have 9,000 kilometers from here.
right,
And so
right,
that's the first thing that you have to adjust to. Then there's also things are very different over here in a way that they work in the lab itself. So you have to learn those new techniques. There are in general a lot more things to learn, because no matter how much research you have done in your bachelor or master years, it's still, PhD is serious, more serious, I
Right.
would say, than
Right.
bachelor or master. So you have to approach it that way. And so that part is a bit difficult to learn. You have a bit more pressure. You're adjusting to a lot of different conditions, having moved from one country to another. There are a lot of things.
Right.
But it's a fun process as well. Looking back now, I think in the first 6 months that I was here, it was very stressful, but I can look back at it now, and it seems quite a wonderful journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you feel that. Uh, Tell me about the first failure you would say you had in your PhD journey. Like maybe it's an experiment that failed, or maybe some other thing that happened with you, if you remember. The
Yeah,
first major thing that happened.
yeah, I can categorize them into so many different groups at this point. Uh, First failures are usually administrative when you're trying to get into another country. Administrative failures are quite common. But in the lab itself, yes, but uh, I would rather give a short background for people who are not familiar with the research that we do. We do some part organic synthesis, some part inorganic synthesis. But to get to the inorganic part, we have to go through the organic part. And organic synthesis is notoriously difficult. Sometimes
Yeah.
things that you want are really hard to get to. And so, as you said, experimental failure is quite common, but in organic chemistry more so, because on paper it seems very logical to approach a particular product through particular
Right.
pathways, but in real life it's completely different. It depends on how you do it and the way you do it as well. It's very sensitive to that. I
Right.
remember being in this stage as well when I come from a slightly dominant inorganic background, so I
Mhm.
wasn't that or experienced in organic chemistry, and so this was something new for me. And
Right.
I remember, to learn new techniques as well as do things that were already established is a bit tough, and that's probably where I had my first failure, where I could not go beyond a certain stage.
Right. Right. But then what was your way of, tackling with it?
I think
What was
it's
the first thing that you thought about?
uh, probably this is something that I learned from my mentor, because he is always someone who tells me, if something fails, you go back to the drawing board. I mean,
Hmm.
if something fails once, you try it again, obviously. But if it fails again, there's a good chance that there's something wrong with the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
Once you've eliminated the possibility of a personal error into it, you can actually go back to the plan. And that's what he tells
Right.
me. Usually, you go back to the drawing board, you see where it could have possibly failed, you find out the reasons that it might have failed for. You try to address those reasons if they are addressable, or you look for other things. So eventually, this is what I did. Was a minor adjustment, but it was something quite, I don't have the right word for it probably, but I learned a lot from that process as well, because going back is so difficult, because in your mind you're always thinking, okay, if I'm going back to the drawing board, it means that I'm going backwards. That's
I'm going a step back. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that is the case, but that's also not the case, because you're
Yeah.
actually improving on something that is not working. So it's actually a step forward and not a step backward.
Yeah. I think
So
optimization is the word I think you're looking for.
yeah,
You
absolutely, yes, that is correct.
you try and go
Optimization.
and optimize your way of working in a way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's very important, and it's good that you brought this out. That I mean, in any field, going back to the basics in some sense always is a good idea, rather than self contemplating about the failure,
Yeah,
which is normal, which is human, and that happens with all of us.
yeah.
That's great. That's good. Uh, in general, in the journey, in the PhD journey, you've already crossed a few years now, and so not only experimental failures is what you face, but you have other failures as well. You have to write papers, they get rejected, or it takes a long time to submit them. These are like very at smaller levels. There are failures associated with it, but there are these big failures as well, where you are in a qualifying exam, and you have a bad review from one of the committee members, or you have a problem with your peers. There's continuous comparison and competition in a way. Uh, Tell us more about how your journey with respect to these aspects of PhD was.
Uh, I would say I was very minimally exposed to these things because
Okay.
my supervisor is quite good, but I can draw from experiences of other people that are working around me. There's absolutely comparison and competition within a group of, who have basically the same PhD mentor. I think some part of it is natural because you're in an environment that is very competitive, but
Right.
it's also a task for the PhD mentor to be able to manage people quite well. That is something that I cannot deal with obviously right now, but it's very important. The first thing that you probably choose rather than your PhD subject is your PhD mentor, which is extremely important. You should choose
Right.
someone who has a good track record, who can actually support you when you fail or when you go off track. He can actually bring you back through proper means and not just pressuring you into things that he wants to do, and actually try to understand what you want from this entire thing as well. Experimentally, it's a different part altogether, thesis wise and everything, but personally as well, you have some personal goals. And a mentor who tries to
I'm going to
understand you.
interrupt you here
Sorry.
because that is where my question will revolve right now is
Okay.
how do you really find a good mentor? What is the mantra of that? Is there anything that you have realized that helped you in finding the right mentor?
I think the primary interactions are a very good indicator of how they are as a mentor. Uh, Obviously, when you're looking for a PhD position, you talk to a lot of professors. There might be someone in the university that you're studying with currently, or maybe someone as far as it was for me. Primary interactions are a very good indicator of how the person is going to behave as a mentor. Discussions face to face or on emails are also a very good indicator. You can understand a lot more. Probably in the written format, it's a bit more difficult to understand the tone that they're trying to convey things to you in. But personal interactions online or maybe in person as well are a very important indicator. You have to consider that a lot.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt because this is like the big question every time people come across in academia. So you mentioned about it, so I thought it's a good idea to know your side of it.
Yeah.
Continue with
the other thing being, I would like to add to this is the other thing is you can probably go ask people in the group itself how the mentor is, how they have had problems, because you can learn a lot more. I think when you're looking for a PhD position, you're still quite young, and so it's a bit difficult to comprehend the scale of it, or just the variety of the problems that you can have. It's a bit limited in that way, but I still think talking to someone who is 3 or 4 years elder than you into his PhD journey, or even postdocs for that matter, 6 or 7 years older than you, you can relate to them on a personal level, and so they would be quite frank with you. In that way.
That's great. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I had interrupted you. So
carry on. I actually forgot the question that you asked me. I'm really sorry. Can you repeat it?
No, we were just discussing about different types of failures in the entire journey.
Yeah.
You were saying about you haven't encountered a majority of it because of a good mentor.
Yeah, that is on the personal side. I think that is something that is limited to the group or the lab. We have discussions and everything. It's quite open, so it's very important that way. When you're talking about publications or exams in general, candidacy exams, it's a bit difficult, but again, you have to choose people correctly. There is especially a notorious referee number 2 in every publication that will have a long list of things that you need to sort out. This is something that is quite common. I mean, that's the basic reason that peer review exists, so that you can make your research better. It's a good process. I think it's very easy to get disheartened by comments that they send you, but I think it's a good process. So dealing with it is probably, again, more on a personal level, that you have to understand their comments are not aimed at you, they are aimed at your work. And so you have to be able to distance your personal self from your work self. And your work self has to be objective, and this is what they are. And this is how we approach science. And so that's probably important to distance yourself from things that they say about your work. You should never consider yourself a bad scientist or a bad PhD student just because uh, someone has some criticism of your work.
Yeah, very well said. And in fact, not just bad scientist, but as a bad person,
That's a
shouldn't
bad
take
person.
it on you as a person that you are not able to
Yeah,
do certain things in a way.
yeah.
Right. Uh, what about the low phases? You personally may have had it, or people around you, your colleagues may have had it. Those low phases in the middle of your journey. You don't feel like doing anything, right? You just start self-doubt. You're you have no motivation. You have very lack of you're in the phase of lack of motivation. What would you suggest, or what you would do in such situations, or what you would suggest to your colleagues in such situations?
Uh, I think this is quite common when you have low phases. I think, irrespective of whether you have successes or failures in your PhD, there is a
Yeah.
time, especially if it's a long PhD, like 5 years, which is usually the case around the world, is usually this time when you start to lose motivation, start really asking yourself, am I really cut out for this? Am I made for this? Will I ever be a scientist as good as my mentor, who's the nearest person to me, or maybe someone else that you absolutely idolize?
Right.
I think it's sometimes very nice to take a break. This could be a short break, as
Hmm.
trivial as something that you like to do, maybe paint. I like cycling personally, so if I feel
Hmm.
low on motivation, I can just ask my mentor. Maybe I can take a day or two off, or maybe a week, take a vacation, go somewhere, take your mind off the subject itself, and maybe you
Right.
can come back with renewed energy. For a bit longer, I would say short-term fixes would work quite well, but if it does not work, I think maybe taking a break in a PhD would not be such a bad idea. I know it's a bit difficult and frowned upon in a lot of places because you would end up
Right.
having a break in your PhD, which is,
Right. Right.
but it is something that I would absolutely like to see in the future around the world, PhD students being able to take a break, maybe something as simple as 3 months or 6 months, go work somewhere else, go do some other science, maybe, or if you don't want to do science, maybe just go eat something, do something different.
But how easy is this? How easy is to do this when you have failed at something in the lab, or in terms of an exam, of a candidacy exam, and you decide, okay, things are just not working here, and let me just go and take a break. Because the human mind, and in a way, the in academia we are so trained that we have this guilty feeling that if something is not working, you don't really leave it there, and you really want to keep trying and get it to work. But how important it is to take a break at such a in such a place, in such a situation.
Yeah, I think failure is a slippery slope, I would say. Once you have had one failure, you would probably start self-doubting, and that just, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you would start going down the spiral. The thing is, sometimes if you take a break, you can distance yourself away from a particular thing that you're struggling with, and gives you a perspective that is different than what you would have if you were right in the middle of it. And so I think
Right.
it
Do
helps
you, do
a
you
little bit.
remember any such incident in your journey that you really needed a break, and you
Yeah, I think I was 2 years into my PhD when we had the lockdown in Switzerland. It was 6 weeks, but it was really tough because I could not see other people, and being in a different country altogether was difficult, on
yeah.
top of not being able to see different people, or friends that you have already made at work. So that time was definitely very difficult. I lost motivation. Because I lost motivation, my work slowed down. It failed after I went back to the lab. Things started failing a bit. I struggled, and
Hmm.
so I got stuck into the loop, I would say. But yeah, I tried to distance myself from the entire thing, saying that probably was a mental issue. So I took a break. I started writing, sometimes just
Hmm.
write or read about things that are not scientific, and that gave me a new perspective. I think philosophy is something that you can turn to, or maybe something that you just like, that maybe can take your mind off that particular thing. It gave me perspective about things, meaning in a way that a lot of people were struggling as well with the entire thing, because it was absolutely new, and it was not me. It was the situation things that were happening around
Yeah,
me
yeah,
that were doing it to me and not really the person that I am inside. So that helped a lot.
yeah, exactly. Okay, okay, that's a very important thing, but we somehow do not realize it, and most people just keep doing things when they actually need a break, basically.
Yeah.
But that's good to know.
Taking
You
breaks is
know, and
actually I'm sorry, taking breaks is actually very underrated in academia. It's quite strange
true.
actually because we are really constantly working because you can probably go to sleep, rest, and that's the only time that I don't think about science. But otherwise, you're constantly thinking. When you're cooking, when you're
True.
doing really menial tasks like going to buy groceries, you're still thinking about science. So
Right, right. It's
breaks,
going on in your head.
yeah, yeah. So taking a break is absolutely important.
Right, right. Yeah. So there are these failures that are because of some mistake that you have committed. Okay. You know it. You realize it that there's something that you did, and that's why the experiment failed, or that's why some certain things did not go according to the plan. Have you encountered such a situation, and what did you do in such a situation?
Yeah, we have some. Well, I would go back to my science and give you an example. We have crystallizations, and we have specific techniques for crystallizations, which one of which uses two solvents, where one diffuses into the other. And there are certain conditions for these solvents to be used together. The thing is, you obviously have to check it before. This was my first time during, I think it was the first year of my PhD, probably after 6 months, 6 to 8 months or something. Wasn't really experienced in it. First time doing crystallizations in my PhD. I used the wrong solvent combination, and so
Okay.
obviously it failed. I waited forever. It's like watching a plant grow, but it never does. So you're just watching
Right.
it. It does not crystallize. It does not grow. Nothing happens, and at the end, you realize that you made a mistake. And at that moment when you realize that you have made a mistake, it's so easy to feel absolutely stupid, and that's when
Right.
you think,
Right.
am I really cut out for this? Am I really supposed to be here?
Right. Right.
But yeah, I mean, as I said, sometimes you just have to put those thoughts aside and you know empty the flask, start with a new one.
Yeah.
It's as
Wow.
simple as that.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I'm gonna take it this way because at that moment you feel it that way, that you're stupid. You probably are not the right person doing the right job. But when you grow in experience and in hindsight, you kind of feel stupid, but you realize that that was like a stepping stone in learning certain new things, because you don't make the same mistakes again and again, right? Because you've realized it in that sense.
Yeah, I think there is a very relevant quote to this thing. I think Thomas Edison said it when he was making the light bulb. I did not fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways in which it does not work. And that's so
Right.
important in science because I think negative results are very important results. It gives you a perspective of things that are not working and in what way they're not working. Positive results are obviously the best because you have something to show for your work, but negative results are absolutely important as well. So this is something that we need to consider. I think people consider failures and mistakes uh, in a very underestimated way. In a way that it does not give you anything new, but I think it gives you a lot of things. Just
Right.
as simple as not going down the path again is a very important thing when you're trying to do the same thing again.
Right.
And making mistakes is probably not okay if you're repeating something when you know that it's not going to work. Learning from failure is so important and so understated in not just academia. I think in every profession or everything that you do in your life.
Right. Right. Very, very well said. Uh, in terms of failure, when you are not feeling good about yourself, your family and the close friend circle that you have plays a big role, right? How was it for you, especially because you were away from your family, and in the place where you start self-doubting, you need that support from behind.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
I'm lucky to have very nice group of friends and my family as well who understand my problems. A lot of friends that I have are obviously from the same field, even if they're not doing the same thing, but we can
Right.
obviously feed off from each other's experiences, which is quite nice. I have friends at work who are obviously doing the same thing. It's very important to talk to them because they are your peers. There's a very good chance that they're going to the same thing that
The
you
same.
are.
Yeah.
I'm talking about friends at work or maybe friends who are doing a PhD, friends in
Right.
basically the same line of work that you're in. It's
Right.
very important to talk to them. I think the worst thing that you can probably do is to close yourself off to interactions in the world, but that's because that's just going to box you into your own small space. And unfortunately, that does not really help. It might help to self-introspect and do things, but self-introspection would probably work on a level where you have problems that are personal, it won't work on problems that are scientific. And so
Yeah.
not
Right.
considering them completely would leave you with probably self-doubt, as you said. But it's very important to have a social structure that can, from time to time, maybe just do something as simple as give you reassurance that you have worked really hard for this and you are at the place that you absolutely deserve to be.
Right. And what is the role of your family in your in times of failure, in times of low phases?
I think they can do something as simple as just distract me from the entire thing by telling me something that is happening at home. Could be politics, it could be something funny that is
Right.
going on, and that
Because
helps a lot.
so often what happens is that many people do not have parents from the same background, right? So especially I've seen a lot of people in academia who have parents who don't really understand the stress levels, the pressures in academia. Is that the case for you? And if yes, then how does it work when you interact with your parents or your family back home
Yeah.
in low phases?
My parents are not from a scientific background, but my sister is also a PhD, so that helps. I can just offload all my
Okay.
worries onto
Okay.
her. She can solve them, not solve them, but help them, help me solve
Mm.
them. My parents sometimes I have to make them understand, but also they have seen my sister go through the same thing, so on some level they have a kind of understanding about how
Mhm.
the entire PhD functions and your mental state during the entire thing. That helps a lot. Uh, to be honest, when I talked about distractions, it was something that happened to me as well when I was trying to convince my mom about all the things that
Mhm.
they were talking about science on the news, which were absolutely not correct. So that's a very healthy distraction to have because you're trying to convince your mom about science, and she would probably not listen to you being a scientist and
Mhm.
would rather just believe on something that you receive on WhatsApp. It's
Right,
as simple
right.
as that. Yeah, just distract yourself and get away from the topic.
Nice, nice. Yeah, overall, I think it's you have very good mantras for tackling failures in terms of going back to the drawing board and trying to distract yourself, taking a break. And all in all, I think it helps you throughout the journey to because as you said right at the beginning of the show, that your ultimate goal is what is important, and you slowly just try and reach there.
Yeah. I think in terms of mantras, I probably don't have a lot, or maybe I do. I don't really realize because every situation is different. The most important thing is that I will have new failures in the future. I'm expecting them. This is something that you come to expect when you're doing science. It might be any kind of failure, personal failure, scientific failure, whatever it is. But the goal is obviously also to learn how to deal with these things. Take your experiences in the past, move
Right,
forward with them. And that is also
right.
very important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, rightly said. And it's not the like we sit down and write down about these mantras, but it's something that you develop subconsciously in the journey, and you kind of hold on to it if you realize that it's working for you in tackling these failures, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's just
Yeah.
mentally recorded. It goes down to your mental diary and then you can just access it whenever you
Right, right. Well, it was wonderful talking to you, Neil, and thank you so much for joining us here and sharing your part of PhD journey. I hope you liked the show and you had a good time.
Absolutely. I loved it. I was already excited about it when you talked to me. Uh, I'm yeah, this has exceeded my expectations. I love the entire thing.
Wonderful.
I love the entire experience.
Wonderful. So all the best with the rest of your PhD journey, and we'll meet soon.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
See you. Bye. So that was Neel Deorukhkar with his way of dealing with failures in PhD. And I'm sure most of you who have gone through the process, or even in general life, you will find these important, and you might have your own ways of dealing with it. So stay tuned to our show, and next week we have another wonderful theme. Till then, take care and see you on the other side.